welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This is episode 91, Music from the Hearts of Space and Other Haunted Radio Shows. Hello, space travelers. We're out here in the deep galaxy, roaming through the cosmos, looking for the greatest space music out there, and we found it at the hearts of space.
Wow. That's amazing. Ross didn't tell me he was sending you, Mr. Hill. I thought I was co-hosting this with Ross Payton.
Well, I'm trying. I anytime someone talks about the hearts of space, I am there in spirit. I have possessed him. Yeah. So if you're not aware, if this phrase means nothing to you, the Hearts of Space is a long-standing radio show that began in its original form in 1973, became a syndicated radio show in 1983, and has been going on ever since. It has over 1,300 episodes. There's a website. I think it's just HOS.com. And it's whole thing. And it's been announced and run by the same guy, Stephen Hill, since 1983. And its whole thing is playing, well, what they call space music. And a lot of times that's ambient music. Sometimes it's folk music or classical music. You know, recently it's been video game music, you know, like the Minecraft theme, C418. And it's one of these things I've just been aware of most of my life because it's broadcast on public radio stations, and I would catch bits of it in my youth. And also their Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I loved as a kid, they made a joke about it. And I was like, I understand that reference. So it's always been like synonymous with me for, you know, ambient, space agey, kind of new age world music, all of those generic labels that don't really define what music is, you know, in them. But yeah, I wanted to do this episode because Burke, you've never even heard of it until recently,
No, I was one of the people who in your intro would not have known what you were talking about. Yeah, I'd never heard of it. And like, I didn't even really know what it was, even after you explained it to me until this episode. So we like looked into stuff for this episode a couple weeks ago. Because at first, I don't know why. I'm going to blame I probably was distracted or something. Wasn't quite listening to what you were saying. But when you first explained it to me, it didn't even click that it was like an ambient radio show. Like you talk about Heart Space and you're like, oh yeah, you know, I had in my head from your initial description, which you're going to be baffled because it wasn't anything that you said. Like, I thought at first it was like serialized, like a plot show, like a Doctor Who, like a radio serial of like, the Hearts of Space, or it's like radio short fiction about sci-fi. I don't know why I thought that. That was like what I was in head. And then I looked up episodes of it for this and I was like, this is just music.
It's just music.
It's just a music show. It's okay. And then it made more sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had never heard of it. I didn't really watch Mystery Science Theater very much, and probably not enough to catch some 30-second bit, I think, that you posted a YouTube link to. So definitely would not have seen that. And also, I'm going to blame Tarantino because Hearts of Space was a favorite of Charles Manson. Spoiler, they're Manson kids in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They should have been listening to Hearts of Space. And then I would have known what Hearts of Space is and wouldn't have to do this embarrassing explainer episode where you tell me about an ambient show from 50 years ago, which I guess, hey, it's 50th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
So we're actually timing this pretty well by accident. Yeah, it's topical. Also, technically, I had in my head this was like the start of October episodes, like spooky month episodes, but it's not really very spooky, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some episodes they maybe have done horror music because it's so varied, digging through the 50 years of episodes or whatever. But no, I mean, unless space is spooky for you.
I mean, space maybe no one can hear you scream in space. That's
I've heard that.
Yeah, it's pretty spooky.
Yeah.
For me, it's fascinating because, you know, I did listen. Like I said, it was on public radio station. I would occasionally listen to it, not watch it as a kid. But it was, you know, at least on my radio station, it was played late at night. You know, like, you know, the NPR during the day, and then they whatever music or, you know, Hearts of Space and that kind of thing during the night, especially on the weekends. For me, though, it's kind of like the biggest like mainstream representation of ambient music, like as its own thing rather than just background music for, you know, shows and movies and that kind of thing out there. Right. Like this is a thing that's showcasing genres of music that are not really like given a platform in mainstream pop culture, at least in America. Like there's tons of, you know, rock and rap and country and like all these other common genres. But like ambient is just like what the fuck? What is that? You know, no one will even acknowledge that it exists. And so it's, for me, I've always been just like, oh, wow, it's found a foothold and it stayed there all this time. Like there's enough of a demand for it. And there probably would be more, you know, without this, would there be this renaissance in the last 10 years, since streaming became a thing, streaming music and more niches and subgenres of music becoming popular? Would there be this sort of like foundation? Would there be this explode? Would Dark, did Hearts of Space crawl so dark, your cryo chamber and others could walk? You know, I guess is what I'm trying to get across. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard to tie those influences down. I'm sure you would have to ask artists, you know, especially ones who, I guess this largely aired in North America, right? So probably not if you're a European or, you know, South American or something.
Yeah.
Ambient producer, but maybe you still found it. Maybe it was out there in some capacity. And of course, there's lots of other popular ambient through like classical composers, you know, through the mid 20th century, or like Brian Eno, you know, literally coined the term ambient. So I think there's probably a lot of influences, but I do think it works for what we talk about on the show is like haunted, because we do cover ambient. And I think there's like a weird little haunted aspect to it, which is not Hearts of Space specifically, although it certainly counts. I looked into like similar shows because I'd never heard of it. I'm definitely probably, I don't know if I'm in the minority of not hearing about it, but I definitely, like, Caleb knew what it was when I mentioned that we were doing an episode on it the other day. He was like, oh yeah, I used to watch that like all the time as a kid, or listen to it rather. And it's interesting because I was looking up similar shows, and I think it's funny how many of these other shows, I guess I'm just going to name one, which is Star's End, but there's others, are like space themed, or like deal with space and like some sort of like vastness beyond humanity or whatever. And I think, you know, don't have to get too deep into it, but it does make it haunted or hauntological, because to me, like space, or like some sort of space age, is like the ultimate or lost future for us culturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because like, especially there's so much of like space age technology, space age material. We're dumping 30% of our GDP into space in the 60s to beat the commies to the moon. And you're going to see all this wonderful trickle down technology, which have in a lot of ways, right? We got Tang and computers, but it never really has not yet materialized, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially once we won the space race, we were like, well, got them.
Yeah, we won.
Yeah, we won. We don't need this anymore. And didn't get my explore the cosmos, because there is a lot of that type of imagery. So I think way back when, like 10 years at least ago, I really remember, and I should look up the song, I'm gonna do that right now, is there is like a music video I stumbled across for a Laserhawk song.
Ooh.
And I do not remember which song. It wasn't like one of their big hits like Overdrive or something. But I really loved the music video because it was all like Soviet space era propaganda, like animation. And I just remember really liking the animation in that music video. I wish I could remember the song. Oh, it was Cool Breeze. It was 10 years ago, so it was 2013. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And the actual song itself doesn't really matter. You know, it's a very, 80s throwback, sort of ambient synth piece. It's not really that ambient. It's like chill, I guess, chill wave. But yeah, all the animation is from 60s era Soviet space propaganda, and it's all like people in front of huge command cars and like rockets and stuff and growing life on other planets. And I just think of like all of that sort of propaganda as like as kind of the ultimate lost future, especially for me. I like space. I grew up watching a lot of like more optimistic space stuff like Star Trek, Next Generation. And then you look at what you ended up with. I do think there's like an escapism and a haunted aspect to anything being space themed.
Yeah, no, like if you look back at the history of Hearts of Space, it started in 1973 at a radio station in Berkeley, California. And so like there is this idealism that comes with like the ambient and synthesizer type music, right? Like that like especially back in the 70s, it was like, oh my god, we can make music digitally, we can make music with these machines, we can create new kinds of sounds that have never been heard before, and we have to explore this, and we have to try this out without Buchlas and Moogs and all this other equipment that's now available to us. And so I think it's this sort of like utopian hippie ideal that is sort of the seeds of this. Is like, we don't listen to the same kinds of music we've always listened to. We can try something new. We can have, music that is not meant to just be danceable. It is meant to like alter our mental, our mental landscape, I guess. And I think, that better future, like this is sort of an optimistic program in its nature, because it's all like scrolling through the list of episodes, I can just see a lot. Like, there's not really much in the way of dark ambient or horror or anything like that, but like, focusing on different types of music, like India or, sub-Saharan Africa, or winter harmonies and, ice castles and like touching the sky and desert realms. They love realms as a, and a lot of big realms. And they also highlight specific artists, but like the kind of artists you would recognize, like when the German ambient artist Klaus Schulze died, like I think last year, they did an episode, with some of his contemporary works, or more, recent works. So, Sacred Singing Metals, that's from last year. And we can go all the way back to like 1992. We get, Lands of Snow, Blue Shadows, Time of the Unicorns. Like, it's this, I think that's sort of what it's rooted in, is this idealism. And even though now that's been long forgotten, like the vestiges of it are still there.
Makes it interesting. Like, I don't know enough about specific history to really know. It's probably a little early, but I wonder how much of this, like coming in 73 in Berkeley, is out of like a seeming coming collapse of 60s progressive.
Oh yeah,
America.
Yeah, we have that grand disillusionment.
Now you're in like because now you're like in the 7th or 8th year. Well, not 7th or 8th year, sorry, but you're like deep into the Vietnam War, and you're starting to see more like conservative pushback. How people, the counterculture of the 60s, which and not too dissimilar from kind of being in the 20s. Yeah. The 2020s, rather, seeing kind of a fading of some of these more progressive views.
Well, there's a really fascinating interview on their website. It's from 2005, but he talks, Stephen Hill talks about the history of it. And a lot of his stuff is like the history of radio itself, like the regulatory environment, like the split between commercial and non-commercial radio that like happened in the 1960s, and like how, there's a lot of very specific legal and technical or technological developments that led to this as well. Not just the idealism, but like it sort of inhabited this. Like, I mean, there were lots of radio shows from that time period that were created, obviously, but like this is like one of the few, or maybe the only one that's lasted this long. So it obviously had some sort of appeal that these other shows didn't. Yeah. I mean, like the 60s were, they had, the Great Society, like, and this grand, America is great. We're better than those godless communists, and, we're the land of freedom. But then like then people started like, oh, well, how about civil rights for people of color? Like, oh, well, we weren't meaning that kind of freedom. Like we wanted things to be better for just the people with power, not to say, and so I think that kind of friction, well, we're getting off topic, but yeah, it's it's a time of transition. Like in pop culture, this unlimited optimism of like 60s pop culture to this incredible disillusionment of the 1970s. And so people get disillusioned with traditional music. Yeah.
Maybe, is there like a 50-year disillusionment cycle? I don't know.
Probably. Yeah.
Probably. It doesn't matter. Oh, man, that just wiped every point I was going to make in response to what you're going to talk. So, yes, I'll just say I agree.
I'm sorry.
No. I was going to say something else, but I think you covered it.
Okay.
I don't think I have anything to add. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So, do we want to talk about the music at all? I mean, this isn't really like a music episode, but we did listen to some episodes of it.
Yeah.
Can talk about that.
Yeah. So just in general, the Hearts to Space website has a subscription thing where you can, if you sign up and pay, you can listen to all the episodes, but the newest episode, you can always listen for free. And also there's a couple of things on YouTube if you keep searching for them. And so I think we both listened to the 1984 one, which is the 2.5 hour one. And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I liked it. So it'll be in the show notes, of course. Somebody put together, it's called Radio Program Tape from 1984, which I think aired in April around that time. It doesn't have a lot of details. I guess this is something that somebody pieced together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from 83 to 87, I guess.
Yeah, it was in one of the first episode on it was entitled Pleasure Cruise, which aired in April 1983. Yeah.
Yep. A section of The Traveler from 1987. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like wish I'd heard this more as a kid because, you know, when you're a kid, you always, you're kind of at the mercy of what your parents play in some sense.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So like, you know, my childhood music memories are like, you know, classic and prog rock because that's what my parents, you know, that's what my dad liked. A lot of Three Dog Night. But yeah, and I didn't really even have a concept of ambient music until I went to college. Basically, the first time. Doug, who I've talked about before, was my third eye opening friend in film school. And he introduced me to a lot of stuff like Aphex Twin and Brian Eno and all this other ambient stuff. That's like really where it came from. But that's probably stuck with me since then. You know, whereas like a lot of other genres have come and gone, you know, like metal phases come in and out or hip hop phases come in and out or like punk emo phases come in and out. That's probably been like a thing I've never stopped liking in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wonder if I'd heard it even earlier.
Yeah, I do remember.
Pretty formative.
Yeah, listening to bits of it on my own, but I do remember one point where my parents were driving. I was in the car, obviously, and it was night. We were coming back from a road trip or something. And my dad turned on and just like, what the hell is this? Oh, this is, made fun of it for like a couple minutes and turned it off. Like, they call this music, like my dad's very much like, if it ain't Miles Davis, it's shit, it's very particular about his taste in music. He doesn't listen to that much music on his own. He's one of those people who prefers to have the TV on. So it's always like CNN or something. So I didn't listen to a lot of it. And for me, my awakening was like discovering Boards of Canada was the big one for me. That really, I don't remember how I found out about Boards of Canada though. It wasn't, I don't think it was like a friend's like, oh, you need to listen to this. I think it was like finding it on LimeWire or Napster or something.
It's like a mislabeled Real Big Fish song. Like, what the fuck?
This is cool, Yeah, I like this. Something like that. This is not a virus. Boards of Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to say on this YouTube thing that there is in the first comments, there are timestamps, and our boy Vangelis is in the playlist.
I saw that, and he's one of the tracks I liked. And before I looked down there, I was like, because like 35 minutes through 50 minutes, like these three tracks is Ojas or Ojas. Vangelis and Synkestra. That like was like a really good block of experimental kind of 70s 80s synth that I really liked. That part stood out to me, probably one of the more ambient parts versus later. Like the later stuff is like more new agey.
Yeah, I
would think like around the hour to hour and a half mark is much more what I think of as like new age pastiche. Yeah, but it's interesting, but not as interesting. Man, I just love drony synth. I like when the computers make noise.
Yeah, I am kind of tempted to. I'm gonna have to check out their subscription thing because I kind of there's part of me who wants to like do a deep archive binge of the older episodes because it like parts of like this old episode like from 40 years ago is like, oh, this sounds like I could hear this contemporary ambient music to like, oh, this is definitely 80s. This is 80s as fuck. Like this is like there's just even though the technology has obviously drastically changed over the years, the sounds, in a sense, have been kind of like, oh, this sounds good. We're going to keep doing it. It sounds like this random 1982 synthesizer. So we're going to just emulate that digitally now. And it's going to sound exactly the same thing. So it's just like the big names like the Roland 808 or whatever. It's like, oh, yes, I love the sound of this obscure German synthesizer. So, but they're using kind of the similar techniques. And it's really cool to just see how it's changed and how it hasn't changed over the decades.
One thing I really like that's not music related, but is of the time related is that in the outro calls, he would say that you could send him $1 and he'd mail you a playlist of that episode.
Yeah.
I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And they're like, oh, you could we have an information packet you could mail to, you could get. And it's like, oh man, if you were an Ambient fan, you had to be dedicated back then. Like none of this like convenient streaming options, pull up Spotify or YouTube or whatever and just like here's a 6-hour playlist of perfectly curated music. You had to work for it. You had to pay attention when he gave that address right at the end of the show. And put a stamp on an envelope and mail it. Oh my God.
And everything's kind of $5-10 a month, but you could listen like for $1, on their, it's free. You can stream for free on their website, but
well, I think it's only the most recent episode for free.
Right. But for $1, it's like this week's episode. And then if you get up $10, though, it's all channels, like whole albums, playlists, favorites, like curated playlists he puts together and stuff. Kind of interesting where you can just like, I don't know if I like this, so I can just do like 10 hours for $10 and just do whatever you want. Yeah. In those 10 hours and see what you like.
Full service, all access. Yeah, I also like you can just purchase hours of listening, like 15 hours. Yeah.
Just help us.
Yeah. They do a lot of good work. They used to have like a record label too, the Hearts of Space Records. And apparently Stephen Hill's still working at A&R to help, find new artists and produce new compilations. And they've been doing some other things as well. But like, yeah, he's just been out there like any genre, any sort of like scene or really needs people to handle like the back end of stuff, like the community logistics and like curation and there's sort of like a lot of them are the unsung heroes that keep a genre or tradition of art alive. And Stephen Hill has been doing good work in terms of keeping this going. Like, where would ambient music be without him? Like, how many artists have been discovered, got their careers started by doing this?
Yeah, it's just one of the parts in that long chain going back to Satie and stuff, I guess. Even if you want to get back into the influences discussion, you could go probably that far back. But it's it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like I say, there's some other interviews and stuff, but I don't know what else.
Yeah, did you look at like it does mention a couple other shows that do this? Ultima Thule ambient music from
I linked that because it's Australian and
like, oh, that's an unfortunate name though. But yeah.
It's not one of their better ones. No,
Yeah. Stars and musical star streams echoes. Yeah, I didn't have time to look at any of those, but like it is interesting that they all started in the 80s and they still are and they've been keep on going since then. So like that was sort of like there's an interesting historical time period where like there's a core audience of ambient music listeners, but there's no way for them to easily find new ambient music because it's not like charted, it's not on TV, it's not on any of the other radio stations, right? So they like established this foundation and then they've carried forward ever since.
Yeah, to me, so one of the other ones, these shows that kind of keep going is Star's End, which is on WXPN, I think out of Philadelphia. So also public radio, of course. And that's still going. It's 5 hours every morning on Sunday from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Jeez.
Well, I don't think it's going to be on prime time, But yeah, they say it's a blend of electronic ambient space, chill out avant-garde, low intensity noise, new age, international spoken word, classical, and that which is considered unclassifiable, which is in itself a classification. So sorry. But yeah, they have all their episodes up on the WXPN.org site. You can just listen to them. There's some delay in posting them because the most recent one is the 27th of August. So that's missing a few weeks. So it might take them some time to get it up. But I think it's the same thing where guys just been doing it since the 70s. Yeah, 76.
Yeah, and I love their website. It is very Web 1.0. They still have their MySpace page link on there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which still works. They're still a thing.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah. It is interesting also because so we have this little cohort of like ambient radio shows that have been going on for decades. And it's a very like, again, it's all generational, right? Like it's something, just a confluence of historical factors came together to create these shows and keep them going all this time. But you're never going to, like when those DJs like retire or pass away, right? They're never going to like, maybe one person will carry it on, but they're not going to continue forever probably. Like it's very much like all our forms of art are sort of like just kind of a reminder of that all of these forms of art are unique to certain like influences and like periods of time. You know, like there's always that like, oh, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. Well, you couldn't make Hearts of Space today either.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons, you know.
Mm-hmm. So I think that segues into kind of what I was thinking about, which is the closest analog we have in our time are sort of two things, which is either like, unfortunately, like Spotify discovery type playlists or like user curated ones too, right? So if we want to stick to user curation, right? Because someone is putting together a Hearts of Space episode or someone is putting together a Star's End episode. It's not, I don't think, procedurally generated in any capacity. So the two things that compare, you know, there are people who put together curated playlists of kind of niche things on like Spotify, which I've found. I've been like, oh, I want to listen to like Korean shoegaze or something. And you know, somebody's probably made a 50 song playlist that you can at least start with.
Oh, sure.
And figure out what you like. And then the other thing just being is like YouTube, right? I mean, Hearts of Space is functionally the same, serves the same purpose as watching like somebody's hour-long playlist or whatever, right? And somebody's doing that curation, that crate digging, that putting it all together and putting it out there in like a little unit that you can consume. But the problem is, and pointing to your point about how you couldn't do it, and like the economic conditions are different, is like there's no one who's really huge doing that, right? So for a variety of reasons, I mean, it's fairly thankless. So if you're just doing it for free, because you can't monetize any of those videos on YouTube if you're just putting a bunch of other people's music in them. So you're largely doing it for free. So there's no like institutional support to keep doing that unless you really love it. And then the people get busy.
Yeah.
Or life comes up or something happens and there's no institution or a structure or whatever to help that show continue to exist. And then it fades away or goes away. Cause like, remember like 2 years ago, there was that channel that was like, Tardy Obscurus JP. And they would post all those videos. That were like,
right. Yeah.
You know, an hour of Japanese city pop to drive through the fields with,
like
Japanese hip hop to fight your enemies too, and like that type of stuff. And these were super popular, but then he was like, "Oh yeah, college is really busy, so I can't do this anymore. Sorry." And it's just gone. Like,
I mean, that's the thing is like certain types of art like require like time to build up knowledge and like, you know, once you learn the basics, there's a lot of subtle like things you can do to make it better, right? You know, but like if it's not in our current capitalist system, if it's not financially supported, like at a certain point, you just have to give up because you can't sustain it. Like, unless you're a member of the idle rich, and very few of them are going to like dedicate their life to a craft in that way. Right. And, you know, it's like I just read about recently. There's a type of pasta that's incredibly hard to make. It takes 20 years to learn. There's only 3 women left in the world who know how to do it. They're all in the same family. They live in San Francisco, and they make it for once a year for a festival. It's like incredible. It's like a woven net of pasta. It's very fine. It takes time. You have to like feel the dough, and when it gets the right consistency, and you have to add salt. It's a whole thing. But like none of the other family members want to learn it because it takes 20 fucking years to master it, right? And that's a lot of time to make a pasta that when you're hand making it, you can't sell it for that much to sustain your livelihood to do it. And it's just like these rarefied art forms that go away. So like curation, and Stephen Hill probably has mastered a lot of things about picking exactly the right songs and mixing them, and knowing what to say in between segments and that kind of thing that, would take a long time to really master. And like when he retires, who's going to fill those shoes? What's going to happen to Hearts of Space? And it is a conundrum that it's very valuable and it's a good art form. And he found a way to make it into a career, but like, there's not like, a school and or institutional support to crank out more Stephen Hills.
Yeah, I mean, I was earnestly surprised that he still did it.
Yeah.
Like, given how old the show is and when he started, I mean, the dude in the portrait for Star's End also looks like, same guy been doing it since the 70s. You don't start it when you're a kid, so you got to be in your, your 60s or 70s.
Yep. His Stephen Hill's webpage doesn't even have his like age on it. So, yeah.
I mean, you assume he probably didn't start it as a kid, so he's at least 18 in 1973, so at least 68 now. Yeah, you hope that there's people out there who can carry it on in some sense. That would be an interesting call to action, is like, there's all this revival of obscure physical media, right? It's not even obscure anymore to say, but it was for a time. It's like, oh, now I get like all these cassettes and I get all these vinyls and I get all these mini discs, which are fine formats, but bring back obscure transmission mediums, right? Stop listening to Spotify and just put on internet radio. Just listen to fucking public radio. You can do it through your browser. You don't even need to get a bunch of hardware. Engage with obscure transmission form. Not just physical media.
You know, one of the things I've always wanted to do is I've actually looked into starting an internet radio station several times, and like a Shoutcast or an Icecast server. And I've thought about it. I've never really committed to it, but
it is a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I've also like my fantasy job would be like be the DJ of a radio station in like a Fallout or like GTA world, like where I pick really good music and then I get to have little like narrator bits or where I'm talking about the news or what's going on or just
the courier was spotted out Springs today.
Exactly. And then put on Big Iron on the zip.
Yeah, that's interesting and pretty cool. So I know I've talked about it before in previous episodes, but hey, it's been like 4 years of doing this, and I'm gonna have a growth mindset, Ross, that we have new listeners every episode.
Yay!
But I think the very first internet project I ever tried to do was a radio station / music podcast. So it was me and my friend Denialist, who is on our Patreon Discord. He was one of our first supporters because he's been my internet friend since like 2001 or something stupid, going back to like the fucking Penny Arcade forums when there's like very, very long, interesting history. Known each other for a long time, but yeah, like 2003, 2004, it was like right when RSS feeds started to become a thing. We started the Sad Robot show, which I know I've talked about before, but it was all just like indie, screamo, emo, punk music. And we tried to do it. And we tried to do like 4 or 5 episodes as like a radio show, but the VoIP technology wasn't there yet. Like the internet latency was too high. Like even if you had a good connection, like your ping through something like Ventrilo was still like 100, 120 milliseconds, which is just enough to make conversation really stilted. Like even us on Discord right now, we have about like 10 to 20 milliseconds of ping. And that's actually enough that it can make our conversations sound a little odd, just because the timing is very, very slightly off. And you can always tell like recorded online versus like recording in person.
Oh, sure.
Like just the energy and the timing is so different. Just there's that little offset in communication and other factors like being in the same room with the person, whatever. But the point is like, it just made every bit awkward because there's like just a little too much delay between us. Like conversation sounded weird. So we transitioned it into like a radio show and did that for a few months. But yeah, it was just too hard to like go to school. And I mean, I wasn't a good student, so I didn't put a lot of time into school. But like, like constantly digging up music and like putting together a good playlist and having everything like flow nicely and be interesting and have like ebbs and flows of energy and feeling and like doing that is really, really hard. And so we just stopped. Yeah. I think we were just like, this is very difficult. So
yeah,
I appreciate how hard it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would recommend everyone to at least try listening to one episode, the one we have on YouTube or their latest episode, wherever you listen to it and check it out because it's out there.
If you can, if you can listen to it in a way they know you listen to it, like listen to Star's End on WXPN. Or listen to Hearts of Space on the Hearts of Space website. Let them know. Let them know you like it.
Yeah. It makes all that hard work, worth it when people actually say something about it. Like, a lot of times when you create something, you put it out there, you just get a deafening silence. And yeah. So even a critique is better than nothing a lot of times, unless, and I'll be listening to some more of it tonight. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. In our next episode, we are going to be going into full 100% spooky mode with some dark synth. You'll love it.
I love it. It's going to be another episode of a genre that I don't really know that much about. Mm-hmm. So I'm at least looking forward to learning something.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, you already are a fan of dark synth, Burke, because you like John Carpenter's movies. And it feels like a good chunk of every dark synth mix I listen to is like, oh, yeah, you like John Carpenter, too, huh? Cool. But there's some legit great. Yeah, there's some.
Boom, boom, boom. Boom.
Got it.
There you go. That's the whole episode, folks.
There you go. But we'll stretch it out to 30 minutes.
My specialty.
Yep. And if you like this, if you want to keep us going, you could join patreon.com/NightClerkRadio. We have bonus episodes, a lovely Discord, a couple other rewards, and yeah, it's a cool vibe, and you'll help Night Clerk keep going on into the foreseeable future. We are on at Twitter and Blue Sky now, at Night Clerk Radio. I'm at Ross Payton. Burke is at Burke McBurkinson. We have a website, nightclerkradio.com, Facebook page. So yeah, you have ways to reach us. And please rate and review our podcast on Apple, Spotify, whatever. I just checked up on our reviews on Apple recently.
Oh, Apple, you posted.
Yeah. And it's very positive. Yeah, people have varying opinions on how many samples we should play versus just discussion. Some more, some less. So I don't know what we're going to do with that. There's not a consensus, but put your voice in there. Should we play more samples? Should we play fewer? Or is it just right?
Reviews from 2020, so fuck. I'm kidding. I'm kidding if you still read it. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Opinions vary, but we appreciate it all the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And until then, we'll be out there in space listening, and I hope you will be too. Bye.